People have always looked up at the sky and have always seen something strange there. Objects that don't look like satellites or airplanes, shadows, flashes, disappearing dots. And every such moment gave rise to the same question: are we alone in the universe? Today, the topic of UFOs has become part of pop culture, internet myths, and jokes. But behind all these memes lies one simple thing: genuine human curiosity. But what do we actually know? What has been hidden from us? And do we have any evidence at all that intelligent life exists somewhere else? Welcome to the History Show channel. This is Myths and Reality. And today we will try to answer a question that humanity has been asking itself for thousands of years. Do aliens exist? And what are UFOs really? Let's go! The history of the unidentified flying object phenomenon from ancient times to the 20th century. If you think that interest in UFOs is something from the 20th century, that's not the case. People observed strange sky phenomena long before airplanes, space, or even the idea of aliens. They could only interpret all of this using the words available to them. For example, in ancient Chinese chronicles from the Zhou era, there are descriptions of heavenly chariots that rose vertically, leaving fire behind. In India, the texts of the Mahabharata and Ramayana mention mysterious vimanas, heavenly chariots that flew, circled, and disappeared. And in ancient Egypt, the scribes of Pharaoh Thutmose III saw fiery discs circling in the sky. Of course, this is not proof of aliens, just a fact. People observed something unusual and tried to explain it as best they could. In antiquity, such stories were very common. Roman historians, for example Julius Absequent, left an entire book about miraculous phenomena. There are circles of fire, flying lights, and even a shield that moved across the sky. The Greeks described celestial spears that suddenly appeared and disappeared near the troops. Today we would say it's a meteor, a comet, or an atmospheric phenomenon, but for them it was something frightening or illuminating. In the Middle Ages, interpretations became even more mystical. In Europe, there were occasional mentions of celestial ships, as if they were sailing over the cities. In the 1200s, there was a story in Lancashire, England, about an airship that supposedly caught its anchor on a church spire. The event is most likely a legend, but it shows that the topic of the unknown in the sky has always fascinated people. In 1561 in Nuremberg, Germany, the townspeople witnessed an entire battle in the sky, or at least that's how they described it. The old engraving shows many spheres, crosses, spears, and cylinders appearing to collide. Today, this is explained as a combination of atmospheric phenomena and collective illusions, but the document exists and looks impressive. As scientists began actively observing the sky in modern times, even stranger things appeared. In 1803, there was the famous case of Utsuro Bune in Japan, a woman who appeared on the shore in a round capsule covered with inscriptions. Today, historians consider this story a mix of folklore and a real shipwreck, but ufologists often use it as evidence of early contact. By the 19th century, technology had improved, and the first attempts to record such events appeared. In 1823, Mexican astronomer José Bonilla noticed hundreds of dark objects flying in front of the solar disk and even tried to photograph them. Most researchers believed that these were birds or space debris, but it was the first known photograph of something unexplained. At the end of the 19th century, the United States experienced a whole wave of reports about airships. People described huge cigar-shaped craft with searchlights, and some even claimed to have heard voices or seen passengers. Today, this is considered a mix of newspaper sensationalism, charlatanism, and sightings of early experimental airships. But the hysteria was real. 1947, the birth of the modern unidentified flying object era. Subtitles. This brings us to the mid-20th century when people were already used to seeing strange lights and objects in the sky. But all of this remained scattered stories. There was no overall picture, no term, and no sense that this was a global phenomenon. Everything changed with one random sighting. In 1947, on June 22, private pilot Kenneth Arnold was making a routine flight over the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. The weather was clear, and Arnold, an experienced pilot, owned his own plane. And suddenly he noticed 9 shiny objects moving in a chain. He said they were flying unusually fast and skipping through the air, just like when you skip a saucer across the water. Arnold didn't say the objects were saucers, he was only describing the way they moved. But the press latched onto that particular metaphor. That's how the term flying saucers was born. This case went viral long before the internet existed. Newspapers printed drawings, journalists embellished the story with details, and other readers started finding similar sightings themselves. Psychologists would later call this the first signal effect, when a new idea fills the information field and people start seeing confirmations everywhere. But the real storm broke out 2 weeks later, in early July, near the town of Roswell, New Mexico, when a farmer discovered strange debris, sticks, foil, rubber, and lightweight metal strips. The local military base initially released a press statement mentioning a flying disc. This was the Pentagon's loudest mistake in many years. The next day, the press release was withdrawn and debris identified as a weather balloon was found. But it was already too late. The headlines spread across the country, and for thousands of years people believed that the army had captured a spaceship. The thing is, back then the United States really was running secret high-sensitivity radio surveillance programs. It was Project Mogul, the very one whose debris was found on the ranch, but since the project was classified, the military couldn't share any details, which only fueled suspicion. Now, the phenomenon had everything it needed for mass culture. A sensational event, mysterious sources, official silence, and the sense of a hidden truth, rumors turning into real data. After that, the number of sightings increased, and although the vast majority of reports were explained by satellites, meteors, atmospheric optics, or experimental aircraft from the Cold War era, the very idea of UFOs began to take on a life of its own. However, everything changed when people whose profession was to observe the sky, pilots, military operators, radar and thermal imaging specialists, got involved in the topic. And along with them came data that could be verified and analyzed. The first case that made experts talk seriously happened in 2004 during exercises off the coast of California. The aircraft carrier group crews noticed a strangely behaving object on radar. There's no heat source, no usual trail, just a mark that appears and disappears. 2 FA-18 fighters were sent to intercept, and one of the pilots, David Fravor, saw a white, elongated object, smooth, wingless, and resembling a tic-tac capsule. It hovered, accelerated sharply, and moved as if it ignored the basic laws of aerodynamics. When the pilots tried to get closer, the object literally dove down and disappeared at incredible speed. Later, this footage became public, and the Pentagon confirmed its authenticity. A few years later, in 2015, new recordings came from the east coast of the United States, from the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt. In the video, which was named Gimbal, you can see a dark oval-shaped object that seems to rotate around its own axis, changing orientation without any visible source of propulsion. Pilots observed such objects for several days in a row. They appeared suddenly, hovered, moved against the wind, and most importantly, behaved the same way on visual cameras, infrared systems, and radars. These episodes share one thing: none are typical. I saw a light and couldn't tell what it was. Here, there are instruments, coordinates, trajectories, independent observers, and people who can distinguish a star from a drone. And it's important to emphasize that none of these observations prove the existence of aliens. They only show that there is indeed a phenomenon happening in the sky that doesn't fit into known models. And this data can no longer be hidden. They have become the subject of discussion in the United States Congress, in scientific journals, and in Pentagon reports. Documents, leaks, and congressional hearings have already acknowledged this. But to understand why the United States government suddenly started speaking openly, you need to know what was happening behind the scenes. Starting in the 2000s, there was a little-known program in the Pentagon called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It received funding, collected pilot reports, analyzed radar data, thermal imaging, and eyewitness accounts. For a long time, its existence was denied, until in 2017, the former head of the program, Louis Eliberts, publicly stated that Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program did indeed exist, and that some materials were concealed for political reasons. After these statements, a series of events made unidentified anomalous phenomena a national topic. Journalistic investigations, leaked documents, and interviews with current and former military personnel occurred. Pilots said they were afraid to report strange objects because people would think they were crazy. Some talked about cases where radars detected hundreds of objects moving in sync, but something got lost at the bureaucratic level. In the end, public pressure became so strong that in 2020, the Pentagon created a special task force to study unidentified anomalous phenomena, and a year later, the first official report was published. It was cautious. Of hundreds of cases, 144 remained unexplained. And the documents directly stated that the objects demonstrated unusual behavior, high maneuverability, and a lack of visible propulsion systems. Then, congressional hearings followed. For the first time in nearly half a century, the military answered questions from politicians about what they see in the sky. And here the main point was made. Not a single one of these cases can be clearly attributed to known technology or natural phenomena. But at the same time, and this is important, there is no data indicating the extraterrestrial origin of the objects. Pentagon disinformation: how the United States itself created ufology. When people discuss government secrets or secret programs today, conspiracies, underground laboratories, and hidden materials are most often associated with aliens. But the truth is more ordinary. For decades, the American military really did hide some information about objects in the sky, but the problem is they weren't hiding aliens at all. They were hiding their own developments. And that's exactly what unintentionally became the foundation for the modern ufology myth. It all started in the midst of the Cold War. The United States developed new reconnaissance aircraft like the U-2 Strategic Reconnaissance 71 and later the F-117, which could fly higher and faster than anything else then. They were tested over Nevada deserts, including what would later be called Area 51. Such prototypes flew unusually silently at high altitudes, sometimes leaving strange light trails. People saw flashes, rapid movements, unusual glows, and mistook them for UFOs. This also benefited the military. Any explanation except the real one made the scouts' job easier, so, as it would turn out later, the military sometimes encouraged the spread of alien theories. There is a documented case where officers left fake photos of flying saucers near bars close to Area 51 to distract attention from real tests. In other instances, intelligence agencies gave unofficial briefings to unidentified flying object enthusiasts, discussing alleged programs to study alien technology. One of these fabrications was a program called Yankee Blue. The idea was simple. If someone saw something odd in the sky, it was better they believe it was a flying saucer than a secret intelligence project. During the Cold War, this was seen not as disinformation, but as protection from Soviet spies, journalists, and accidental witnesses. Such smokescreens eventually became part of pop culture. Rumors about aliens spread in newspapers and books as the military chose not to get involved. The further the discussion is from the truth, the better it is for secrecy. And this is where the main paradox arose. People were convinced that the government was hiding aliens, but in reality, the government was hiding its own aircraft, allowing the public to come up with any alternative explanation. After many archives were declassified, it looks almost ironic. For decades, ufologists sought a secret conspiracy which existed but involved earthly technology, not aliens. That's why today's Pentagon statements are viewed both seriously and skeptically. And that's why dozens of conspiracy theories continue to exist in society, ranging from the most plausible to the completely fantastic. I'm not going to tell you all of them right now, otherwise the episode will drag on for 2 hours. You can look it up yourself if you want. About the underground laboratories at Area 51 where alien technologies are stored. Or about aliens who helped build the Egyptian pyramids. What matters to us is what science has to say about this. What does science say about UFOs and life beyond Earth? Science doesn't deny life's existence in the universe. It only says that so far we haven't found any evidence of its presence. No Martian bacteria, no microorganisms from Jupiter or Saturn's subsurface oceans, and no signals from advanced civilizations. To this day, we know of only one planet where life exists, Earth. But that doesn't mean life is impossible anywhere else. On the contrary, modern research makes the universe much larger and more hospitable. Within our solar system, several places spark significant scientific interest. Mars was once wetter and possibly warmer, meaning there are dried-up riverbeds, traces of ancient lakes, and ice. Instruments occasionally detect methane, but its geological or biological origin remains unclear. Europa, Jupiter's moon, hides an entire ocean beneath a thick layer of ice. And similarly, Enceladus, Saturn's moon, has geysers that eject water with limited molecules into space. If microbial life can exist anywhere, it's there, in the dark depths, warmed by internal heat. Beyond the solar system, things get even more interesting. Modern telescopes like James Webb can study the atmospheres of exoplanets around other stars. Scientists are looking for so-called biosignatures in them, signs that may indicate life, such as oxygen, water vapor, and methane in certain combinations. Some planets have already shown intriguing chemical profiles, but none of them are evidence of life yet. Let's return to UFOs, now called UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. The scientific view is clear. An unexplained phenomenon does not prove extraterrestrial origin. Most often, what seems like an anomaly turns out to be one of three things: either an atmospheric phenomenon, an instrument error, or a human interpretation of something people aren't used to seeing. Nevertheless, even scientists admit that a small percentage of observations really remain unidentified, but that doesn't mean aliens are behind them. It just means that we don't have enough data yet, and that such phenomena need to be studied, not ignored. Therefore, the scientific position ultimately sounds like this: the probability of life existing somewhere out there is quite high, but there is no evidence for it yet. And if we really want to find them, we shouldn't make up answers, but patiently gather facts, and this is essentially the only honest approach. Fermi paradox: why don't we see others? When discussing the possibility of life in the universe, the same question often comes up. If the universe is so vast with countless stars and planets, why have we never received any signals or found evidence of another civilization's activity? This question is called the Fermi paradox, and although it sounds philosophical, it actually has much more common sense than it seems. The essence of the paradox is simple. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe, and in our own galaxy alone, there are hundreds of billions of stars. Now we know that almost every star has its own planets. Given such huge numbers, it's hard to believe life only arose on Earth, yet we see no signs of intelligent life elsewhere. Around. No radio signals, no megastructures like Dyson spheres, no probes, no visits, nothing. The main contradiction is that life should be widespread, but we don't encounter it anywhere. Scientists offer many possible explanations, and one of the most obvious is distance. The universe is so vast that even if a civilization exists somewhere, we may simply never cross paths. Light travels slowly, signals get lost, and the speed available to us today only allows us to reach the nearest planets within the solar system. Under such conditions, contact becomes almost a mathematical impossibility. There is another explanation as well. Civilizations may be at different stages of development. Some may be too young to venture into space, while others, on the contrary, may have disappeared long before humans learned to build radios. Civilizations may emerge and disappear millions of years apart and never overlap in time. Some researchers talk about the so-called Great Filter, a set of obstacles that most species simply cannot overcome. It could be the fragility of biology, the instability of planets, self-destruction through technology, or something we have no idea about yet. If such a filter exists, it's quite possible that intelligent life is an extremely rare exception, and we just happen to be among those who made it through. But whichever option seems correct, the Fermi paradox raises an important point. Our lack of knowledge is not proof of loneliness, and the absence of contact is not proof of the absence of life. It just means that we've seen too little, understand the cosmos too poorly, and are moving forward too slowly. Today, we don't have a single confirmed fact that would indicate contact with the unknown, but we do have understanding. Life may be widespread throughout the universe, and we ourselves are just a small part of the vast cosmos that we've only just begun to explore. And perhaps the most honest thing we can say is that the question is, are we alone or not? Remains open. But that's not a reason to make up answers. It's a reason to keep searching. Thank you for being with me. This was the Myths and Reality segment. See you in the next episode. Bye.